Welcome to the Reel to Reel podcast, where the stories behind the board go on record. I'm your host, Bruce Hensal, and we're here to give you an insider's look at the music industry. I'm joined by my co-host, Chase, from the Melrose audio team, and this month's guest is Rick Roberts. We're in 4 separate locations, including the audio studio in the Melrose Center of the Orlando Public Library. Please welcome my friend, Rick Roberts. Rick is a singer, songwriter, author, advocate, and all-around swell guy. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you, Bruce. Nice to see you.
Good seeing you. Good seeing you. Rick, what I'd like to do is I'd like you to give us like a 4 or 5 minute overview of your career. Just a quick outline, hitting the high points.
Gee, too bad you need 4 or 5 minutes. I could sum it all up in one word: lucky. But no, okay, I can do that. Actually, it's for me. I was fooling around like a lot of other teenagers when I got to Washington, D.C. I started doing some hootenanny things, open mics, whatever. And I did one night, and this guy grabbed me after I came off, and he said, "You're really good. I'd like to make a record with you." And I said, "Well, do you do that sort of thing?" He said, "Well, yeah, you may have heard of me. My name is Paul Rothchild." And I thought, Paul Rothchild, Doors, Janis Joplin, Rick Roberts, sounds right to me. So the guy told me he was based in L.A., and if I could get out there, he would put me on retainer until he got done with his current project. Now, if I'd known more about the way it all works, right then some alarms would have started going off, because nobody pays retainers to unknown artists out there, whatever. Anyway, I was 19 years old and I wanted to believe. So I did. And I hitchhiked cross country. I went to Paul Rothchild's house, knocked at the door, and this little guy comes out, and I said, "I'm here to see Paul." He said, "I'm Paul." I said, "No, you're not." He said, "Yeah, I am." I found out later he was. And the guy who approached me in D.C. was who knows who, because I never found out, in fact. I guess I owe him thanks in the end for getting me going. But nonetheless, my dreams crumbled in about 2 seconds. But Paul was nice enough to say, "Come in." I explained to him what had happened. He said, "Well, come in and play me a couple songs." So I did. And he told me, "Well, you do have talent, but you're in a whole different arena now. So I want you to go out, play around for 10 months or so, and then come back and see me. Maybe we could do something." And I thought, I didn't want to be elated or crushed. So a lot of other things happened. I ended up spending about a year knocking around LA, doing auditions. I did a boatload of demos. I must have done 10 or 12 for 10 or 12 different labels, all that. But ultimately, I was just about to give up, and I got talked into going back to Columbia. I'd been there and been rejected, and auditioned for a new guy named Alan Rindy. And I went and auditioned for him. And after about 3 songs, he grabs his phone. At the same time, he's saying, you're good. You have a good song, good voice, but you need a band." And picked up his phone. And I thought, well, that's kind of abrupt. And, picking up the phone. And I said, okay, I started to pack up my guitar. And he said, what are you doing? Sam. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm getting you a band." I said, "What?" And he was calling Eddie Tichter, the manager of the Burrito Brothers, who had just recently fired Graham Parsons as part of that, and arranged an audition for me with them, which ultimately happened, and it worked out from there. So I spent the next 2 years with Burritos, and when Chris and Al decided to go with Stephen Stills and Manassas, the Burritos pretty much broke up then, but we still had a prior contracted obligation for a European tour. And so they asked me if I would front the band, since I was the only one who'd been on the prior European tour that was left. Michael Clark had gone off to Hawaii. Chris and Al had gone to Stephen and Manassas. Byron Berline and Kenny Wirtz were playing with us at the time, and they had gone back to Country Gazette, and that left me. And the promoters of the European tour said they were going to sue if we didn't do it. So they asked me if I'd please do it. So I did that. That extended my Burritos thing for 6 months. Then there were 2 years of 2 solo albums and a whole lot of touring around. incredible number of learning moments, let us say. And then when I realized after my second album, which you, Bruce, know about because you were executive engineer on that, I realized that, that nothing was going to happen with that, and A&M was going to drop me. And I had heard that thing about good singer, good songwriter, but you need a band thing a lot of times. So I thought this time I'll fool them and I'll have a band. So I put together Firefall as Rick Roberts in Firefall at that point to back me on whatever new contract I got. Well, when the most interested label announced that they were going to take a pass, the band said, well, I guess there's no reason for us to be together. I said, wait a minute. We're a good band. Why don't we drop the Rick Roberts and make it just Firefall? Which we did. And the only downside of that was that I unintentionally made the band into a total democracy at that point. And as most of us in the music business know, democracies do not work in bands very well. Someone has to be driving the boat, So that led to several years of chaos and good music, but a lot of internecine warfare, as they say. It was fairly energetic and fairly tense a fair amount of the time. But after that, I left the band. I moved back to California from Colorado, which I'm living in again, but I moved back there, and I got a call from the IRS one morning telling me I owed them $250,000. And meanwhile, my lawyers were saying, don't do anything because there are still debtors from Firefall that we acquired, the band had acquired, while we were still a partnership, not a corporation. So there was no protection for me. And the creditors could come after who had made the most money, wherever they thought they could find it. I was it. So my lawyers were saying, don't do anything for the next couple of years. And I went, oh, well, that's fun. But I did. I went out and did a duo tour with Chris Hillman for a little while, 3 or 4 months. And then I went out with a band called the 20th Anniversary Salute to the Birds, which featured Ricky Danko and Richard May from the band, Gene Clark and Michael Clark from the Birds, Blondie Chaplin from Beach Boys and Rolling Stones, like that, John York from Latter-day Birds, and me. It was really a good band. And we ended up going around for a couple of years. And then I formed something called the Roberts Meisner Band with Randy Meisner from the Eagles. He'd left the Eagles recently. And we did that for another couple of years. Finally, I went back with Firefall in the late 80s, early 90s. And I was drinking too much, and by mutual assent, I decided it was time for me to take a break. I got married right after that and laid off music for quite a while. But then I got ready to go back to work. I'd gotten restless and proceeded to hit my head and suffer a subdural hematoma, lose my ability to walk for about 3 years, and just kind of music on hold for a while. And from there, I've done a few things. I tried to put a band together. It was too top heavy. And I found there's a big difference between trying to put a band together when you're 25 years old and when you're 55 or 60 years old. Because the young guys, they're all in. It's the most important thing in their life. But when you're 55, most people either give up on the dream, fail miserably, or whatever, but they've acquired a life in the meantime. They've got a family or, other work or whatever. So even simple things like getting together to rehearse are a monumental obstacle. If I could get the band together twice a week to rehearse, it was wonderful. And a new band needs to be in there every day working 8 or 10 hours to really get it down, get really comfortable with one another, all that. All that, Bruce, I know. But the thing is, we didn't have that time, and it was not really a workable thing. And then just before COVID appeared, Larry Burnett and I went back to work together, doing a duo with a third singer and guitar player behind us. And that was just starting to take a little root when COVID came around, and Larry being diabetic and all of us being in excess of the prescribed vulnerability age. I try to say we're old, So it makes it a little easier to catch
Yeah.
on. And so we have laid off from that, and that is my synopsis.
In a half hour. Uh, no,
Gee,
I'm
time flew.
I'm joking. I'm joking. Uh, you forgot to mention, since we are sponsored by the public library, that you're the author of 2 books.
Indeed. Well, in
Uh,
fact, it will be 3 soon. There's I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Is there more to the question first?
well, I was just going to say the first one I haven't read, but the second one, which happened after your brain injury, called Lame Brain, I have read, and it's certainly an inspiring story.
Well, thank you. I got around to writing those. What happened? I had been, just like probably every musician, had people coming saying, "Oh man, you should write your autobiography," and I was going, "Yeah, man. Oh no, you got all those great stories." Yeah, but a lot of musicians have great stories. Well, but okay, so I declined. In other words, and then one night, same conversation, and a guy who's a critic for the Denver Post, or was at that point, heard the conversation and called me over and said, "Rick, listen. You're right about a lot of musicians having stories. There'll be a lot of rock books out there, but you got something going for you that a lot of people don't, and that is your brain injury and recovery from same, and your recovery from alcoholism. And so you have a book that might do some good for some people." So I felt this cloud of responsibility come down, and at the same time, having had my accident, I hit the left side of my head, which left brain affects the right side and vice versa. So the thing is, with guitar playing, I could chord fine. My strumming was almost non-existent. I had what I like to refer to as an adversarial relationship with my arm. It was like I would say, "Okay, do this," and my arm would say, "You talking to me, sucker?" It was, as I said, it was like not necessarily I command, you obey. So I needed an outlet for my creative impulses. And so I decided I would go ahead and write my book. And I wrote a memoir. I sent it to a literary agent who'd been waiting for it for about a year, and I didn't hear anything back for a few days. So I wrote her a note saying, "Did you get my memoir?" And she said, "Rick, I got it. I was just about to print it, and it's 200,000 words. And a autobiography ought to be 100,000 words. So I can't read it because I'll never be able to sell it." So I went back to my editor at the time, now a publisher, and I said, "Okay, Brittany, what do we do with this?" And I know the first thing we can cut out is song stories, because that was kind of a glorified appendix anyway of songs, and then a story about what inspired them, or what I wrote about, which aren't always the same, or just a story that happened after, a relevant story. And she said, we can't limit that. That's what your fans are going to want to see." And I said, "Well, okay." So we went on with other possibilities. And she said, "Wait a minute. Yeah, we're going to eliminate song stories, but what we're going to do is we're going to make it a book of its own." So that was the first book. She called back a while later and said, "Hey, Rick, can you isolate the time where you talk about your accident and your recovery from that, and make a book out of that?" And that is what became Lame Brain. I fleshed it out and all that stuff. So finally, about a year ago, she called back. She said, "Rick, there's too much of the good stuff in your autobiography. Can you rewrite the period of time that became Lame Brain?" I said, "Yeah, I can." So I took a different angle on it, rewrote that span of time, because we're talking 5 years there. I can't just kind of leave that out. And so that, anyway, is going to be out under the title "And It'll Be All Right." And that should be out, I think, in the next couple of months. But basically, my books were the result of my injury and needing to not just be pulling my hair out. And I don't agree. Okay, I'm thinking of a rhyme. So I didn't want to do that. So I wrote instead. And by the way, within the next year or so, I have a fictional novel, which is about 3/4 done, called Family Trees. And there is a little talk about maybe using it as a TV show, because my ex-manager, who has passed away, unfortunately, knew everybody in Hollywood from his 40-some years of doing it and everything. And he was talking to a couple of friends and mentioned that I was writing a book. They said, "What's that about?" And he told them, and they were, "Whoa, that'd be a great TV show. Give me a treatment." So I was working on that, and there was seemingly very good response. And then my manager passed away. I lost all the connections. And now I believe I have someone that I'm working with that he has 8 Emmys himself. So he does have those connections. So we'll see what happens with that. But anyway, the literary thing is, I really enjoy it. And you don't have to rhyme anything either. So.
Great. Chase, do you have any questions for Rick?
Yeah, I guess, I'm kind of just curious in general about, with the way things are currently, how that's affected, your production or things your projects you've been working on. I think that's always a valuable perspective I've been enjoying asking our guests here.
Actually, I do know a few artists who are beginning to go out and do selective things and making accommodations to the health situation, all that. I know a couple of guys. There's a guy he thought of as a local talent, but it turns out they're big stars in Europe. That's a guy named Chris Daniels. And Chris has taken to doing drive-in theater concerts. He has people come in the cars and all that stuff. And I know some people who are doing other accommodations, but this whole thing, my overall feeling about it, this is really a direct answer to your question. It's kind of like a tangent from saying, that is that I'm concerned that maybe this whole lengthy layoff is going to end up with a lot of my generation of musicians who they took time off from their heyday and then have reformed their bands or whatever, but are going out and actively doing all this stuff. But they're people in their late 60s, mid 70s, things like that. And I have this terrible feeling that a lot of those people are going to take this year of unintended retirement and just kind of figure, well, yeah, maybe it is time to hang it up. And I think that if that turns out to be the case, we'll lose a lot of the last vestiges of wonderful time in music. Yeah. So,
the COVID and the Zoomization of media is making us become dinosaurs more quickly, I think.
Breathing dinosaurs, everything. Yeah, I agree with you. And, and that's the other thing. I mean, I had a unique, or not unique, but a rare opportunity when around 2010 or so, I decided, I hadn't done anything for quite a while in music, but I had a whole bunch of things that were on disc or tape, whatever, unreleased material. So I decided maybe I would put them out on iTunes or whatever and at least have them out there. And I discovered that the music business was an entirely different species of creature than I had left some years before. I mean, and I had to really get a crash education in the new reality of it, which was majorly centered about the entering of media and iTunes and YouTube and all that into the scene and into the equation. And it was, I think Kenny Weiss, you know who Kenny is, of course, Bruce Stephen Still's former publishing guy, magnate. And he summed up really well. I said, guys used to go out on the road to sell their records. Now guys make records to go out on the road. And because the source of income has changed so radically from royalties from records to live music performance income, it's night and day. It's just going 180 degrees around. And every time I hear the old story about how, I guess it was iTunes went first to a bunch of the major dudes in music and said, hey, we're going to do this thing. What do you think? We want to go in? And the music industry said, get away, boy, you bother me, kind of thing. And something got swallowed by iTunes on that.
So there's the answer to your question, Chase. I would like to time travel back to when you and I first met. I was living in Boulder, Colorado, And I was working for Stephen Stills, and I believe I did some demos at Banana Land for you I remember Mexico. And then when you were putting Firefall together, I was working for Nick the Greek. And and that's where you guys rehearsed. I mean, Jock was working
in the
there too.
walk-in freezer.
Exactly.
That's where we did rehearsing. Yes. I know. Well, I remember the Banana Land things. We cut that song. We cut a song. I have a song called "Tell the Truth," and another song called "Falling in Love Again." And we cut those three songs that in Mexico. And I remember those sessions. I didn't necessarily remember you. I was still trying to meet the musicians I was working with. But when I remember us really being involved at first was when Chris called you. And Chris, what had happened was I did my first solo album with Dave Andrew, who's a wonderful producer, and all that. And when it came time for my second album, David was booked for the next 2 or 3 years. So as an alternative, he said, well, why don't you think about maybe Chris Hillman as a producer? You guys know one another, you've written music together, all this stuff. So I called Chris, and Chris said, sure, but we'll have to do it in Colorado. So I came out here. That's what I was doing it out here. And you got involved with that. We got to be friends. We found out I was only living half a mile, 3/4 mile from where you were living on University or Marine. You were on 527 Marine.
That's
exactly.
Right.
And that's what, 40 years ago, 45 years
Yeah.
ago? Anyway, but that's the address, 527 Marine. And you were going out, I guess, on the road. Great story. Well, it's great now. It wasn't so great then. You let me have use of your little red Volvo sports car. And that had a major effect on my life because while you were gone, I got a call from our road manager, Robert First, from his lady friend. Now, Robert, as you know, Bruce, Robert was a mid-40s ex-San Quentin guy, wonderful man with a very strong set of values and ethics, slightly modified by spending time in San Quentin, but he understood truth, honesty, loyalty, all the basic values of things. He'd learned maybe the hard way. I don't know. But nonetheless, that's Robert. This woman was a 21, 22-year-old college. She was graduating, going into master's degree, graduate school and all that. And they had nothing in common, plus 20-some years between them age-wise. And he told me, he said, yeah, it's not working with doing and so it's going to be over. Yeah. So she called me while they were on the road, probably the same trip you're on. And she said, look, Robert probably told you we're splitting up. I need to move out. I don't have a car. Do you have? I said, well, just not usually, but right now I do have access to one. So I helped her move that day. And as a thank you, she took me out to dinner. One thing led to another. And after we said goodbye the next day, everything was kind of in place. And then about a week later, about 7 a.m., there was a knock at my door. And I said, who's it? I was sound asleep. Who's it? It's Bob, man. Not it's Robert, you son of a bitch, or anything like that. Just, it's Bob, man. And I said, hey, went and opened up the door. And he said, you, and a word that I don't even get to use on podcasts, I guess. My old lady, man, you, her. And then he punched me in the nose. And then all the anger drained out. And I said, Bob, it was a mistake. It was wrong. I admit that. But, you and she both told me you were right about it, all that stuff. Anyway, that's the end of it for about 3 days. And then I went into the bathroom one day. And as I was looking in the mirror and blowing my nose, my scepter went, and I said, to about 45-degree angle, I'd say. And I said to myself, that can't be right. So I went down to the doctor, and I had no bruising or anything under my eyes, which I understand you usually get with a broken nose. But I did have a broken nose, which I never had repaired. It just kind of grew back and had slightly different shape. But I have your card to thank for that, Bruce. So I blame the car. I blame the car. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's funny. That's very funny. Well, we've pretty much covered what we need to here. Do you have any more questions, Chase?
No, nothing. Nothing else really comes immediately to mind. It's very interesting to hear, this history between the two of you, and all of these projects that you worked on. So I don't know. I don't know how much more I could say other than I didn't get a chance to follow up with the previous question that I asked you. But to your point, you're talking about people wanting to, kind of like with the way everything's been complicated, so to speak, just kind of wanting to, shelve some of these things. And I was talking to, I can definitely see that because I was talking to some of my old mentors who did, who did lessons, or even my old high school band director, and they're, trying to deal with working with students over Zoom, and my band director is trying to do his whole band program over Zoom, and he's basically told me that he's ready to retire at the end of the year. So it's I just not to go all the way back to that, but that is kind of sad, and hopefully things will turn out a little bit better than what I predicting maybe.
Well, I think one of the results of the COVID problem that we're going to see is, besides the fact that a lot of businesses have closed and probably will never come back, is a lot of people.
350,000 people,
Yeah. And I think a lot of people our age in the music business, because of having this enforced retirement on them for nearly a year, a lot of them are probably not going to pick up the burden and go trudging back, especially if they're in a position to not have to do it for monetary reasons.
Yeah, the thing is, even if COVID had not come around, my generation of musicians has only a couple of years left to go out and do this because our audience is dying. And so, many people have passed a love of that particular generation of music on to their kids and grandkids, which is a wonderful thing. We toured a lot with the Beach Boys a while, and one of my favorite things was to go out and look at the audience, and you'd see grandparent, parent, kid all sitting together, all rocking out to the Beach Boys. And in recent years, I've been seeing that with Firefall when I go to see them play now, and with other artists of our generation. So there is some carryover. So my statement about their dying is kind of overinflated, but
but it's never going to be the mass that it was, because we were generational,
right?
And it's like teenagers relating to their parents' music. They like it.
I like Frank Sinatra too, but
exactly.
Yeah, well, it's the other thing about it is somehow in my mind, I always figured that as you trace rock and roll from its very start through the era of the singer-songwriter and all that stuff, the substance and the content of the music increasingly got, it had more content. There was some stuff there, and with Bob Dylan, just to name a person, who ended up in rock and roll, even though he started folk. The lyric became the thing. There had to be something more than "Ooh, I love you, you're so true," or "Ooh," or whatever. Instead of that kind of mindless thing, lyrics that actually said something, which made sense because the country rock or folk rock that I was involved in came from just that, from folk and country, which are much more storytelling mediums than rock and roll music. So anyway, my overall thought was that it would continue to mutate to a more respectable, if you will, type of music. You saw people like Yes coming along and getting very, very complex with their musical things, and it seemed like what was happening. But suddenly, somewhere along the line, it devolved back into disco and rap, and rap too. When it started, I defended rap as being an updated version of the new Bob Dylan's because they were describing the situation, a real life situation, telling stories. But when it devolved to gangster rap and all that, but anyway, I look now. I watch the entertainment, the hit entertainment that's on TV sometimes, and I've had to recalibrate a little bit, and that is they're entertainers. And nobody said that whatever sophistication came to rock music was going to have to be a part of it forevermore. And it's always been based around the beat from the, or the hook. I mean, and those things are not necessarily as visible in storytelling things, So in other words, it was a one of a kind of era where there was a lot of content, and that folk influence, country influence came in and filled out the picture a lot. Now it's going back to, look at the stage shows. I heard somebody say you could tell the talent of an act in inverse proportion of the number of dancers on stage, and it's true. So whatever.
Okay, one question I have for you, Rick. How do you like the fact that Firefall is categorized as a yacht rock band?
Well, Firefall has never really been categorized as what it was. I mean, when we started, promoters saw Michael Clark, Burritos, Rick Roberts, Burritos, Jock Bartley, Graham Parsons, Foundations, and thought we were a country band. Our first national tour was headlined by Willie Nelson and Jerry Jeff Walker. And it was in places like Tucson and El Paso, Albuquerque. And the way the bill was, it was Willie, Jerry Jeff, us, and opening Asleep at the Wheel. We did our first 2 or 3 shows down there, and some people would come in late to hear a country show, and instead of hearing some, close up the home, they're hearing, there's no way from this rock and roll band. And after about 3 shows and the audience response to our band, we went to the promoters and said, could you shuffle it so that we open and Asleep at the Wheel comes on after? Why would you want to do that? So the promoter, for our own safety, we said, and that was it. But that was the first thing. Then the next thing, people figured that we were the next Bread or something like that. We were a ballad band, and if you listen to the first album, there's songs like Mexico, Living No Way Out, Just What You Need, Just What You Need, or whatever. But there's a bunch of rock and roll stuff on there. It's not a soft rock, easy listening band. We had some ballads that happened to be commercial and workable.
Yep.
So, and by the way, so in your question, the yacht rock thing is nothing new. It's a misnomer or misrepresentation of what the band was or is.
Yeah, I just wanted to stick it to you a little bit with that.
Okay. Actually, I'd love to go to a couple of those yacht rock things. Just
Yeah.
hang out, eat all day, and play a show or two. Yeah.
I want to thank you for joining us on the Reel to Reel podcast from the Melrose Center. I'm your host, Bruce Hensal, joined by my co-host, Chase. And we'd like to thank you, our guest, Rick Roberts, today for all that you've contributed to this. We have much more in store coming up on future episodes. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and follow us on your favorite podcasting app. Join us next month for another episode with another exclusive look at life behind the board in the music industry. And thanks to Carol Hensel for the theme music.
Thank you, Bruce and Chase.
Yes.